This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 303, Multitasking. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're talking about multitasking between projects. Each of us will share some tips and tricks we use to keep all of the projects moving. I'm Nick Laughlin, and today I'm joined, as usual, by John Picozzi. What's new with you this week?
So what's new with me? Actually, I'm not going to say I found a bug because it was a known issue, but I refound a bug on Drupal.org with time. And basically the issue is I'm on the event organizers working group. I'm a member of the event organizers working group, I should say. And when you post an event to Drupal.org, which is where everybody should be posting their events now, when you're logged in, you select time for that event. You save your event. When it saves, it displays a different time. And then if you're logged out, it displays a different time. So I just found this. I got a post of the, I think it was the Fox Valley Drupal meetup. I was like, oh, I want to go. And I noticed that logged out, there was one time, logged in, there was another time. And then on their meetup page, there was presumably the correct time. So there is an issue on Drupal.org. I am in the process of trying to raise awareness for this issue and ask any of the talented folks out there if you have time and energy to go take a look at this issue and see if we can't either figure out a workaround or figure out how to resolve this issue, because it's super thorny for people trying to organize events and not being able to display the the correct time on an event. So that's what's going on with me. I know.
I think honestly, that's actually a deeper issue, because I remember running into time zone issues creating events for a client site. There was just a real big mismatch between time zones and what people were seeing. I'll have to see if I can dig up that issue, because I know that there's a long running issue that basically time zones are wrong.
Yeah. So to be fair, the issue that we are going to link to in the show notes is has a couple of related issues to it. So it is a larger problem, definitely. But it just, I don't know. It feels like it needs to be fixed because time's hard. I don't disagree with that, but it's kind of hard to say like, hey, come to our events page where the times may be right.
The times fluctuate depending on the user.
Yeah, exactly. Also joining us for the final week, Fatima, what's new with you this week?
Following what Nick tells me is a theme of equipment updates. I splurged this weekend on a gaming chair. Voila. For those of you who are watching the video, I don't know. It's been a hard year, and I was like, I want to get something fancy, and I decided to get a crazy chair. I don't think it's as comfortable as the autonomous chair that I did have. It's a little stiff, but I can like sit cross-legged, which is great. And it also looks pretty rad. So yesterday I like turned on my video really slowly to my team meeting. And I was like, nobody say anything.
Yeah, it's very, very bright. Very cool. And for me this week, I got a couple of quick updates. I guess one is kind of equipment related. So I think this is the first show I'm recording actually using my sit-stand desk. I'm standing today, so just kind of trying it out, seeing how it goes.
Wait a second, you're standing up right now?
Yeah, both of you noticed the new backdrop, and that new backdrop
That's why I can see the sign, because I can't see the models. I was like, did I really not notice the Nick Street sign before? Seems odd that I wouldn't. Now I'm looking at, I gotta look at old show notes.
Nobody can see my head exploding right now. I had no idea you were standing up.
Yep.
Wait. Emoji reactions. Where's mind blown?
The other quick tip is something that I can't believe I just noticed this week. I think I noticed it yesterday. I was using Kint on a project, and I accidentally clicked like when you kint something, you get that blue line that's first closed, and you can click on it, it opens it, right? But on the far right of that line, there's a little arrow. If you click that arrow, it opens the kint object on its own page. So it's only that kint object is there. It's so much easier sometimes to dig in, especially if you're working on, if you're kinting something in the theme and it's something that's really narrow and a deeply nested paragraph, sometimes it can be really hard to see what's going on. Click that little arrow, it opens up full screen, and it's much, much easier to see what's going on, see what methods are available, what data is available. So I discovered that yesterday, and I think it's kind of my default way of using Kint now. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
Are you using Kint over like Xdebug, or was it just more of like?
I use both. Over the last couple of years, I have gotten more used to using Kint again. I think the original reason was when I first switched to Lando, there was a period of a couple months where I couldn't get Xdebug working. And at this point, I generally know what's going on. It's just, I need to confirm something. Mm-hmm. So many times I'll just use Kint because it's just really quick to throw it in there. Or, whereas Xdebug works as well, I just don't usually have it running. It's just personal preference. When I'm doing kind of deeper coding and not theming level stuff, I'll typically just use Xdebug. So, and continue the theme of bringing back things from the past. We're still going to have the module of the week for the next little bit. Module of the week this week is SwiftMailer. But I think you put it in, John, this week. So
I did, yeah.
SwiftMailer.
I was doing some Drupal mail related stuff, and using mail system. SwiftMailer made it super easy to get up and running with Drupal mail and Drupal HTML emails in specific. So you basically can install SwiftMailer from Composer. It'll install everything that it needs to. It does use mail system, but one thing I thought was pretty cool was that SwiftMailer actually allows you to set your method for sending emails. So you can actually set an SMTP connection right within SwiftMailer. So typically, I think people, at least I have used the SMTP module to set that. SwiftMailer allows you to do that right within SwiftMailer, allows you to do file attachments for and inline images right out of the box. So pretty useful, pretty quick to set up, and has a template in its module folder. You can move into your theme to, templatize your email if you want to. So you can do a lot of interesting stuff with that. One thing I did find is that apparently core account system emails are not HTML enabled. So you have to do a little bit of gymnastics if you want to get those to be HTML enabled. So know that if that's what you're trying to achieve, but otherwise sending other emails, SwiftMailer is a good way to go.
Very cool. I've used that in the past, although I think like you said, I've been using the SMTP module more recently, but I used SwiftMailer extensively years ago. It used to be my go-to.
Yeah, I thought it was cool that you could set the method in which it uses to send. So you could use PHP mail if you wanted to, or you could set the SMTP. It just cuts down on that like extra module, which I am a fan of in any case. Also, I don't think the SMTP module gives you a template, like a theme template that you can use.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Let's move on to our primary topic, which is multitasking, but more specifically project multitasking. So what do we mean by that? Most of us are working on different projects, right? Different projects within our work life, projects outside of our work life, community projects. We're gonna dig into that and talk with our hosts and see how we manage those. We're not going to get kind of into the nitty gritty of like task switching, like, hey, I got to go email somebody and then, oh, I got to code something. And then we're going to talk more generally about like, hey, when do you carve out time for working on all the things, right? So again, projects today for our conversation, we're not going to just talk about like work related projects like, hey, I'm working on a project for X company or B company. We're also going to include community-based projects too. So obviously, Nick and I are doing the podcast. Fatima's going to talk about some of the things that she's doing, and should be a pretty interesting conversation. We're going to jump into some tools that we use and how we use them. So hopefully that helps you, dear listener, in managing all the things.
So you kind of mentioned briefly, John, what kind of projects you're working on. Can you give us a little bit more detail in maybe what your weekly projects are, or maybe monthly projects are that you're kind of juggling?
Yeah. So I would probably go wider, right? So you said monthly. I think like that's kind of the way I look at things. I may work on each of these weekly, but from an overview, I have at least one check-in meeting a month on each of these things. So camp organizing, obviously Nick and I are on the New England Drupal camp organizing team. So that's something that I'm working on. The podcast, working on doing the podcast every week. Obviously I have a job and I'm working on projects at work. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm a member of the event organizers working group. So working in that, making sure I'm pushing my initiatives forward there. And then last but not least, community involvement. I like to try to stay involved and speak at different camps and go to virtual camps someday, maybe in-person camps. So, I think that's definitely something that gets a time slot when thinking about projects and things that I'm working on.
Yeah. So for me, it's actually pretty similar because we're on a lot of the same kind of projects, but, helping organize NetCamp, working on the podcast, both the production side and the actual hosting side now, and then work. So with work, I generally keep only one or two really big projects at a time and try to keep it there, because more than that is usually too much. And then I'll usually have one or two short-term, smaller projects that are 5 or 10 hours a week for maybe 2 months or so. And then of course I've got a backlog of clients that, they won't contact me too often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, they'll contact me and say, hey, we need some help adding this feature. And maybe usually it's a one-time 4 or 5 hour project. So, a lot of work goes into making sure that everybody, all those projects, their needs are getting met. And then of course, out of work, managing, now that people are getting vaccinated, seeing family again, there's been a lot of barbecues over the last couple of weeks. And, if you look at the video, I have to balance my Lego building as well.
I am impressed. You guys both included fun and personal things in the projects that you're working on. And clearly I was not in that headspace when I was writing the show notes. So I appreciate you.
I just included it.
I think Lego building is important. Everybody should carve out time for that.
Yeah. Well, whether it's Lego building or something else, I mean, part of being productive, I think, one of my beliefs is that you have to really, you have to carve out that time. People always say work-life balance. And I think I'm not a huge fan of that term, but, if you don't have a balance of personal goals and things that you're working on outside of work, then it's hard to be as productive at work, I think, in my experience.
I think the term is important because it essentially, and we don't have to dive into the term work-life balance, but I think it essentially keeps employers cognizant of the fact that people want to be doing other things with their time. And I think, the work-life balance part of it means different things to different people, right? So like, I agree with you. And like, I agree with that term and it being used, but I think it just means different things, different people. Fatima, what kind of projects are you working on?
So speaking of balance, just quickly, I feel like the past couple of months, I've slowly started adding things back. So I think I wasn't able to like balance a lot the past year. And so now I think I'm slowly starting to add more little projects around the house or like with friends. But primarily my work is in developer relations. So a lot of it bleeds into my personal life because it's like work stuff like open source project maintenance, but then there's like community related stuff that kind of doesn't always happen during work hours, and some of it is things like this that like I'm doing the Talking Drupal podcast, but am I really doing it for work? The line is kind of blurred there as far as like I really love the community, but I also get paid to interact with the community, so it can be confusing. Speaking of work-life balance, I also do some mentoring, which I used to do a lot before, and then took like I think it was a 2-year break on just like any kind of volunteer-based labor. So I'm kind of amping that back up. So I have like a mentorship circle where I get to meet with women who are much earlier in their careers in tech and kind of talk them through what they're struggling with, and then things and resources that I found helpful. And then around the house, every weekend is something different. Like this weekend was setting up the backdrop. But last weekend I was taking all of my t-shirts and putting them into a quilt. I like hands-on projects. So yeah. Always looking for something to do that's not at the computer, because I think I spend a lot of time at the computer, both work and personal. And then something that I started organizing that as you were talking about camp organizing, I was like, well, it's not quite as impactful, but I have a gaming Discord where I just get a bunch of friends together over the pandemic just to do virtual game nights. And now it's just kind of a hangout space because everyone's starting to go out into the real world.
So I'm gonna dive into our show notes a little bit here. It says Candyland Discord. So can you walk me through that? Because I'm an old guy and don't understand this.
Yeah.
Are you just playing the board game like with other people on the internet?
It's called Candyland because when I was in college, I used to study with a lot of dudes and I was always really bubbly. And there was one guy that would always be like, it's always Candyland for Fatima, because Fatima comes into class at like 8 a.m. like, good morning, everybody. I'm so excited. And I think he meant it as an insult, but I took it as like oh yeah, it is Candyland. And so the Discord is called Candyland, but we play everything from like Castle Crashers to Catan.
Wait, have you actually played Candyland though? If not,
the physical board game, yes.
No, on the Discord.
No, not yet.
So again,
it's funny. The people on the Discord don't ask why it's called Candyland. I think they just assume like sugar overflow. Candyland.
Yeah, that's my assumption.
There's a theme here of sugary treats. So I'm sorry. I got to go back to that for just a second. Are you actually physically playing a board game, or are these games all online?
They're all online. So we use Discord audio video to hang out. And then I have like a chart where I've figured out who's on what platform, and based on who RSVPs, we pick a game for the night. So it's all virtual. It's mostly because I felt really lonely early in the pandemic. And one of the things I really missed was, when you get on a Drupal camp, you have like board game nights. So that was kind of to replace that.
Oh, that's an idea for NetCamp. We should have a board game session.
Absolutely.
I actually did the first, this is a total tangent, but the first board game night that I did was actually at GovCon, I think.
Oh, really?
Back when it was in person a couple of years ago. And it was super fun. It was a super good time. And
I love board games.
Anybody's interested, GovCon is actually going virtual this year. They just opened up session submissions. So go to their website and submit a session if you are so inclined.
Speaking of websites, let's talk about what kinds of processes we use to organize our projects. John, maybe you can kick this off.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't like subscribe to like one process or at least one documented process. I could be like, oh, I use the agile process of managing all the things that I'm doing. So it comes down to like using a bunch of tools, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then just kind of like focusing on one thing per night, right? So, for example, any given week, after, family time, dinner time, family time, kids go to bed, like, typically I'll sit on the couch and, watch something on TV. And, there'll be like an hour there where I can kind of work on something. So, typically I'll pick one thing a night and it'll be, scheduling for talking Drupal or, getting ready for, a Ned Camp planning session at some point, or, if I'm working on an issue, on Drupal.org, I'll dig into that, spin up a development environment for something that I might need, get a presentation. Like most of my really good presentation time comes in either in the car when I'm driving or sitting on the couch. That's definitely where I create most of my presentations, if anybody's wondering. But yeah, it's just basically that focus time that people have different areas in their schedule of focus time, and mine is usually just picking one thing a night and blasting through it.
John, how do you capture presentations when you're driving?
Sorry, not that's a very good question. Not like necessarily capturing presentations, but like walking through it in my head. So that's typically like, because I'm in the car and I won't seem totally crazy if I'm talking to myself or just talking in general. You can be driving, and like I used to have like a 30-minute commute. So on that 30-minute commute, I'd either listen to a podcast, or if I was getting ready for a presentation, I'd kind of walk through my presentation, which obviously requires you to kind of like know what you're talking about. And,
right.
And then, it's super helpful. I know we're not talking about tools yet, but like Siri is great for reminders. So like if you think of something while you're going through a talk, you can just say like, hey, blankety blank, put this into the reminders app, and it'll key that memory later on when I can actually write it down and create a slide for it.
That's what I was wondering. Like when you come up with something really good, how do you capture that while you're driving?
Yeah,
Just
really
put
cool.
the tablet on the steering wheel and
voice assistant.
multitasks.
No, absolutely not.
Actually, John has a Tesla.
Don't get me started on that. I saw some lady recording a video the other day. Oh, gee, I don't even remember what she was doing. I just remember thinking to myself, she's doing this while she's driving. And like, people are like, oh, this video is great. Nobody's like, stop doing this ridiculous thing and drive your car before you kill somebody. Don't get me started on like using your phone while you're driving. It's a hot button topic.
Yeah, we PSA, you should not be on your phone while driving.
Like all of these cars, the person that's on their phone, like driving like a brand new BMW on their phone with it up to their head, like your car has Bluetooth, set it up and use it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think you can. Massachusetts, for the longest time, that was still legal. It was just Massachusetts and Montana, I think. But 2 years ago, I think they finally made it illegal in Massachusetts to use handheld devices.
But people are still doing it. People are still doing it, which is just dumb sauce. Anyway, let's get back on topic. Nick, what about you?
Yeah. So for me, it kind of changes depending, especially for the working part of the day. It really depends on how heavy my workload is. If I'm on, like, I just finished a big project and I'm kind of on the lighter side of things, then I kind of just generally set up what I'm going to do for the week, usually the Monday of that week, sometimes the Friday before. And I just need to know, hey, I need to take care of these 10 things this week, or 20 things, or whatever it is. And then I just kind of work on whatever I feel like in whatever order, unless there's deadlines that week. And then, if a client reaches out to me, many times I'll just take care of that stuff right away. When things start getting a little bit busier, I'm a little bit more protective of those times. Like if a client reaches out to me, I'll just schedule it when I can schedule it. I usually won't take care of it right away. because I just need to make sure I get things done. And when we're at periods like right now, these past couple of weeks have been incredibly busy. I've literally been just blocking up hours of time to work on my calendar. So I have, for example, I've got 2 fairly big projects. So one project pretty much all day Wednesday is just that project, because it's big enough that I need, I can't just do 3 or 4 hours a day and get done what I need to get done. I have multiple very large initiatives going for that client. So I need 8 hours, because if I get blocked on something, it's not like I can just switch to something small. I need to switch to something big, which is again going to be a 2 or 3 hour minimum. And then, other days like Mondays, as a freelancer, Mondays are stand-up days. So a lot of people have a quick stand-up once a day or maybe 3 times a week with their project. As a freelancer, I go for weekly stand-ups, and I usually have 4 or 5 on Monday. So Mondays are usually catching up on email, planning out the week, making sure there's nothing urgent that I missed, and doing stand-ups and planning with clients. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have blocked, I have probably, I think I have 3 hours each day blocked out for taking care of those like things that come up with clients that you can't really predict, like I said. So those are the times I take care of those types of issues. And if nothing comes up, then I just, obviously I'm very busy right now. So I just fill that time. And then I have a couple of, 1 or 2 really small projects that I'm working on that are still multi-week projects, and those will get taken care of on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I found, when I'm, and that contrasts greatly from how I started out. When I started my business, I just kept everything in my head, probably for the first year. Like I just remembered every appointment that I had, every meeting, every deadline, but then again, I was starting the business, so that sounds a lot more impressive than it really was, because I just didn't have that much to do. But I've found that it changes, and I've had to do this blocking time before, and usually I'm not a fan of being that busy because it can lead to burnout. So I find that maybe once or twice a year I'll go through a cycle like that, and I found when I get that busy, that's a sign that I need to wrap up a project and make sure I protect some time and have a slower period after. Because if you're just always that busy, that's when burnout happens. So it's one of those warning mechanisms, but it's the only way I can get everything done and stay sane and make sure my clients get the work product that I've contracted with them for.
I was just going to say, it's worth noting that the reason that I'm usually doing most of my work at night or in the morning hours is because that 9 to 5 block is blocked off for work, not the extracurricular projects that I'm involved in, and sometimes it bleeds over. But Nick is in a I would say a better position to be a little bit more flexible with that, because he's doing the freelance, he's running his own company and able to kind of curate his schedule. We are definitely going to talk about calendars when we talk about tools, because that's something I live and die by.
Yeah, I also have a 9 to 5, so that changes though. Sometimes it's 9 to 5, sometimes it's 6 to 5, depending on what time zone a client is in. That we have to give a training for. But as Nick was talking about burnout, I was laughing to myself because I used to be the type of person that would block off my calendar for work and also block off my personal calendar. Like, this day you're going to do this, on this day you're going to finish that sewing project, on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. you're going to review your budget. And it got to a point where work was so stressful and I got so burnt out that I couldn't bear to look at my personal calendar either. And there was consecutive weeks of just doing nothing at home and just binge watching and eating and surviving. And I realized okay, I can't do that level of micromanaging myself on personal things. I really shouldn't have to tell myself the exact time that I want to do budgets. And so I switched into different workflows after that, but that made me laugh. I was I was an overscheduler, and now I'm trying to take it a little easier. But to manage the work,
I've never scheduled my personal stuff like that so much. I mean, I guess the closest I've gotten is for the show. I generally try to edit the show Tuesday nights and make sure that, and then I just work on it a little bit for the, usually Tuesday and Wednesday night. So that's done.
Well,
and
the
then I
show
don't
has
release
a
it until-
deadline. So I feel
I'm
like
sorry?
you should schedule it. Your show has a deadline, right? So
Nothing that's not
not really.
self-imposed. Yeah. So, I mean, I aim to get it. Steven used to aim to get it out the day of. And my personal deadline has been the Monday after. So I've been trying to release them every Monday. So that way, if something like last week, we had a bit extra editing because we had 7 people on the show. So I didn't finish editing until Friday, but there was not as much pressure because I knew I didn't have to finish it until Monday. So I try to, rather than just sit down 4-hour block and get it all done, I spend maybe an hour and a half each night and get through it a bit smoother. So how about you, Fatima? So it sounds like you used to schedule
I
every
used
last
to
detail.
over schedule everything. Now for work, I plan it out in blocks. Just on Mondays, I have to figure out like how much time is going for training, how many GitHub issues have been opened over the weekend that I need to review. And then I just block off time. And at the end of every day, because of how chaotic it can be to work at DevRel at Pantheon, like things change any given day. So at the end of the day, I just do like a 15-minute wrap up, like, does the rest of my week still make sense? And move things around. And then for my personal project, it's kind of been weekend based now because nights and evenings have become like mostly reading and self-care. And I'm trying to get back into cooking. And so those are kind of variable activities. But the weekend, I'm like, this weekend, I am going to blankety blank. And I just like pick something and stick to it for 2 days, which has been nice because it's allowed us to have like bigger projects.
Yeah, that I agree with that. I mean, typically the weekends and vacations are family time, but sometimes I'll pick like a bigger thing. Like if I have some feature I want to put on my website or something I want to like test out and play with, like I'll do that on a weekend. I might do it over a couple of nights during the week, but yeah, to me at least, it doesn't feel necessarily like work if I enjoy doing it, right?
Yeah. So let's take a moment to talk about some tools that might help us keep on track. So the first tool on our list here is actually one that I don't mean to keep bringing it back to the show editing, but it's one that I never really truly liked until I took over production, and that's Trello. I've always felt that a lot of people used it for something that it's really not meant for, but to give you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, we create a list, or when I say we, I think it's John does this part for me. We create a list for each show, and it has a couple of different tasks in it. And then as I'm going through, I can just check off each thing. So for example, there's a production task that has everything that I need to do, from editing the video to releasing it on Libsyn to giving it to the patrons. There's one that talks about post-show communication, that talks about newsletter, sending the newsletter, notifying the Drupal Slack. So if you want to chat with us anytime, you can always join the Talking Drupal channel on the Drupal Slack. But not having to remember every time all the tasks, because there's a bunch of small ones, is actually really helpful, because I can just kind of take care of the big ones, then just look at the to-do list and make sure, check them off one by one. And if there's a step I missed, I can always go back and do that before I release the show. So far, that's been a huge help. And it's interesting because, like I said, I was never a fan of Trello before. People always tried to use it as a replacement for Jira.
I hadn't ever used it as heavily as I do now, obviously with doing the show stuff, but I think it's great. It keeps things organized. We're able to do lists and have like future guest lists and future topic lists and all sorts of fun things to be able to kind of drag and drop things around. And so, yeah, it definitely helps keep things organized and keeps, helps keep the projects organized. I might do one for other projects. Who knows? The next thing on this list is Apple Reminders, which I actually use all the time. Because you can use, Siri to, set them for a future date. So a lot of the times I'll as we talked about just a few minutes ago, I'll be in the car, I'll have an idea, or I'll be like, oh, I need to do this thing. And I'll say, hey, blanky blank, do this thing and remind me about it at 9:00. And at 9:00 PM, it'll say like, bloop, hey, remember you said you wanted to do this thing? And I'll be like, oh, okay. Yeah, right. I have to do this. So, I'm sure there are other reminder services out there. It just so happens that I have a bunch of Apple devices. So that's the one I use.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, for reminders, I usually just send myself an email because
how do you do that if you can't type on a keyboard?
I don't. I mean,
all right. Well, there you go.
Nick has a built-in keyboard on his forearm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I usually, like I said, I usually have my phone around me and I'll just send a quick email. And if I'm driving and I can't, then usually, at least for the last couple of years, anytime I was driving somewhere, I was with my wife, I would just ask her to send me an email. So I wouldn't forget.
You never get overwhelmed by the number of reminder emails, or do you just not need that many reminder emails?
No, I don't need that many reminders. So to be honest, most of the time it'll be something like I'll have the two things that I find myself needing to remind myself for is if I do a little bit of work after hours on something, I'll forget to track that time. So I'll just send a quick email saying, hey, I worked an hour on this project. And then, so it's not really time sensitive. It's just that when I'm going through email next time.
Can we unpack that for 1 second? You do a little bit of work on something. You send yourself an email to track the time. Why don't you just track the time?
I mean, like I do the work, I close my laptop and go, oh, shoot, I forgot to track the time. So I just take out my phone, send an email. And then the next time I'm working, looking through email, I'll track it.
Like one of those thoughts before you doze off to sleep. I gotcha.
Yeah. And then, so it's not particularly time sensitive. And then or the same kind of thing, like I'll remember, oh, hey, I know I have this deadline coming up, but I'll remember like, hey, maybe that moved. Like say, for example, I thought it was going to be July 20th, but I know it moved. I don't know when it moved to. I'll send myself an email saying like, hey, remember to ask so-and-so what the actual deadline is for this particular feature or project or campaign or whatever. But yeah, I'm not big on reminders. I maybe send, maybe 1 or 2 of those a week, if that.
So the other nice thing about the reminders app is that you can have different lists. So each thing gets a list. So I've got like a Talking Drupal list and a NetCamp list and a Drupal list and a work list and a home list. So it's like everything is all in, organized. So that way I don't have like, just a random list of things. The next thing on our list, I think everybody uses, I don't think we got to talk about it all that much, but like Google Docs. Google Docs is super important for keeping things organized. I'm going to move right down to the 4th item because I think that's the big one here, people. The calendar, right? I personally use Google Calendar, but the calendar rules my day for so many different, both personally and work related and project related. Like calendar invites are super, super important. And like I look at my calendar when I wake up in the morning, I look at my calendar before I go to bed, and like, okay, this is what we got going on today.
Yeah, I mean, I personally use Google Calendar for that. If anybody knows how to do this feature, there's one feature I wish it had, and that is, so I have some clients that will set up a calendar for me in their system. And of course I can share that with my personal calendar on Google. So I can see it there. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't create an appointment at that same time or show that time is blocked when I share my personal calendar with somebody else. So there's a couple of project managers that I've shared my calendar with just because it's easier for them to just schedule something. And there will still sometimes be conflicts because they'll look at my calendar, will show something free. Somebody else will look at it, show it's free, and they both set it at the same time. I look at my calendar, like, oh my God, last week because of 4th of July, at one point I had 4 meetings in the same half an hour because every stand-up moved, and everybody looked at my calendar and said, oh, 11:30 is free. And they all stacked over it.
So for a while there, I was doing duplication. So like I would have both calendars, and then I would just duplicate the things. Yeah, it is. I mean,
so you can write a Google app script to do the duplication for you, and it can be buggy depending on where it's coming from. But if you want to spend an evening or a weekend,
somebody's got a new project.
I have two methods for you. One is a hacky Google Apps script. I'm sure you'll find one on the internet. I tried it once, but it was really buggy and I got tired of getting error emails. But maybe you can handle errors better than I can. The other is Calendly. The pro version allows you to plug in multiple calendars. So I plug in my personal calendar, which has a lot of like the community and mentoring stuff on it. And then my work calendar into it so that people don't schedule meetings. We actually have a work Calendly and I have a personal Calendly. So it gets really hectic if it's not all feeding the same calendars in.
So
I've actually used
can you share that and just sorry, can you just share busy and non-busy status too? Because that's
so Calendly won't tell people what's on your schedule. It'll just give people a calendar with dates and they'll select a date and they'll see the available times for that date. You can also set like your availability per type of event. So for example, like if I do mentoring, I only want to do it like outside of work hours so I don't get pinged. So I can set it to like 6 to 9 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays only. And like that availability will only be for the mentoring event.
Interesting.
And then you can
really
cool. You can also set I only had a free Calendly account, so it was a little bit limited, but in the paid account, you can set up different meeting types. So like you could set up a meeting type per client and then have those meetings go to a certain calendar on the back end if you wanted to, but still have like that whole list of like, hey, I'm only free from this time. The other nice thing, I don't know if Fatima just said this, but you can set like blocks of time that you want between meetings. So you don't have meetings running right up against each other. You can say, like, keep 5 minutes between meetings, and it'll basically rearrange your schedule to say like, oh, they don't have any time today, but they have 3 times tomorrow because, you know, it doesn't meet the criteria. So I definitely recommend that if you are,
and it changes the time zone for the person who's looking at it. So you don't have to be like, no, I'm on Pacific. I really don't like email tag on scheduling. And so I'm usually just like, people are like, I'm available Monday, Wednesday. I'm like, please just find a time. Thank you.
You know, the other feature I really loved was you can actually, if you have, I don't know if this is from Calendly or if it comes through Google Calendar, but if you have Zoom integrated, it will go through and create the meeting in your calendar and then create the Zoom meeting. And then if you delete the calendar invite, it'll go through and clean everything up for you. So, super helpful in not having to like send people meeting information and call stuff. It just ties into those services and does it all for you.
Interesting.
And just because I love calendars, I use Fantastical, which is another paid app. I pay a lot of developers to get my stuff running. But what I like about it is I have my personal calendar and then I have work calendar. And then I'm silly. I have like a religious calendar, friends on vacation calendar, birthdays. I have several calendars overlaid, like budgeting calendar. And so friends depending on I have a calendar to know, like I ask friends when they're on vacation, local friends, but also friends in other cities. So I can be like, hey, have a good trip. So I don't know. I like to track a lot of things, but I don't like to see them all at the same time. So I turn them all off, but I have one set, like after 8 p.m. at night, it turns all of them on. So at night I can see the plethora of things.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Do any of your friends, this is total non sequitur, but do any of your friends get weirded out when you're like, hey, when are you going on vacation?
No, they just tell me.
I think they know. If they're friends with Fatima, they know Fatima.
Just yesterday, someone was like, oh, we're going to, where are they? They're going to Colorado. And I was like, when are you leaving? And they were like, Sunday at 1 p.m. I was like, thank you.
They're like, oh, I'm going to put my vacation in the calendar. Let me invite Fatima.
One of my friends, they're a couple, they have a house calendar. So they've added me to their house calendar. It's great.
Interesting. Does that include things like shutting off the water outside because it's winter?
Right. And what day not to park out front because it's street sweeping day. So I know, I don't need to know that information, but I don't mind having it.
This show is really making me feel very unorganized and very...
I'm sorry. I'm hyper organized.
There's a home automation thing that a lot of people do where they'll
nope, we're not doing it, Nick. We're not going down that rabbit hole.
I can't leave this cliffhanger for our listeners. So they'll tie their trash, because a lot of cities will have a different week schedule for their trash and recycling. So like 1 week is trash, 1 week is both. And so they'll tie their calendar into that, and they'll have a light that turns on a different color depending on if they should be putting trash or both out.
Ooh, I like it.
But I mean,
Can
but
I
for
do
me,
that on my
Worcester
compost bin?
yeah, people do it for composting too. So they remember to put it out. So it's pretty cool.
All right, let's bust through the rest of these. The next one is Slack. So Slack's not a great place for like keeping to-do lists, in my opinion. But
you can schedule reminders now, though. Schedule messages.
That is the key feature is
Yep.
Throughout the day, like if I get a Slack message and it's not related to like my job or I can't focus on it right then, I will set Slack to remind me about it again, like in that 8 o'clock hour. And that feature is the best thing going. I mean, Slack has a lot of other great features, don't get me wrong, but being able to set reminders and say like, oh, remind me about this at 8 o'clock. And then being able to like snooze that for 3 hours when it pops up, when you're like, oh, I'm not where I thought it would be. Super helpful.
Yeah, no, it's great. Slack has really taken over as the primary form of communication for me and my clients. I have to say though, for all those Slack developers listening, do me a favor. Please allow me to disable unfurling for all URLs, for all workspaces permanently forever. I never want to see the hint again. And the same goes for integrations. I never want to integrate anything with Slack. And I mean, it gives me the option to integrate on Slack channels that I'm not even an admin on, so I can't even do it. Like,
well, hold on a second, because I'm going to combine Slack with the thing we just talked about in calendars. I used to have a Slack integration to my calendar that would ping me in Slack 5 minutes before a meeting and 1 minute before a meeting. Oh my God. It was great. It was
that actually might be an integration that I would actually use, but everything else, oh my goodness. I feel like the number of times I click the X when I'm sharing something on Slack.
And then it says edited.
Also, the Zoom integration is great too. If you are, you need to start up a Zoom call from Slack. That's pretty awesome. Otherwise, I have mixed feelings about unfurling links. Sometimes I think it's helpful, and sometimes I'm like, please stop. Like one instance is animated GIFs, and when it's really annoying animated GIF. But anyway, next on the list is email. I think email is pretty self-explanatory. Clearly, Nick uses a lot of email.
Well, email's changed though. So very briefly, I used to check my email 10, 15 times a day. I'm at the point where I check in the morning, maybe during lunch, and at night. Like email is not the way to get a hold of me anymore. Email is the place to, if you talk to me about something on Slack and I need some more detail, email is great for that. And I can get it on my calendar. But if you need to get in touch with me, Slack or a phone call at this point, I don't check my email often enough anymore to respond promptly.
Important question for both of you. Inbox zero, Fatima?
Can't do it.
I'm not able to. I mean, no. I try to, but I actually use my email unread as a to-do list.
Right, because you get reminders in your email. Oh, wait, does inbox zero mean all emails have been archived to their relevant folders, or just all unreads have been dealt with?
All unreads. Well, to me.
Okay, so if the question is, do you deal with all your unreads per day? No, generally. If the question is, do you organize all of your emails? My inbox is full of thousands of emails I need to move to folders.
To be fair, I'm in the middle there. I do inbox zero, meaning like all unread messages have been like read and like
sorted,
figured out, right? But I also keep things in my inbox that need attention. So like I will go back through items and say like, almost like a to-do list, like, oh, hey, I need to do this. Let me leave this email here so I remember to do it later. But I'm very much like zero things in the inbox. If I can get there.
No, absolutely not. I generally have about 30 unread emails at a given time if I'm on top of stuff. If I'm behind, I'm at like 200, 250.
Listen, I opened my wife's phone, and this is going to be telling. I apologize, sweetie, but I opened my wife's phone the other day to like, I don't know, I was looking for some picture or something, and she had like 2,500 unread emails. And
Did you mark them all as read?
And I was just like,
What?
I was just like, what is the deal here? And she's like, oh, it's like personal email, some work stuff. Like, I'm just not like, I'm going through and doing like, I'm like, here, take your phone back. I can't do it. It just
how do you know what you need to take care of if you have that much unread email?
Yeah,
I mean, I have friends that have 4,000 or 5,000 unread.
Most of it's like, I think personal email, and it's just like store advertisement stuff. And like,
I filter that.
Oh yeah, those get labels and immediately read and deleted.
The second time a store advertises and I get an unread, that gets added to the labels.
I literally like, I get email, like I'll get emails and I'll go through and be like, yep, delete. Okay, moving on.
I actually have to set up some new rules. Speaking of email productivity, one of the things that as a freelancer, I have access to several different Jira or Jira-like projects.
Oh, that's a lot of emails.
So yeah, but I can't do those over email because like I said, especially now when I'm working on this project on Thursday, I will go to Jira, look at my tickets, look at the updates, and take care of what I need to take care of. I'm not going to ever look at that in Jira. I mean, in email anymore. I can't context switch fast enough. And so I generally put those in a bucket. So that they get marked as read immediately on my side. So I have the record of them if I need the record of when something was created at some point for some reason, but I'm not responding through email or tracking those, especially with Jira. Like you change the status, you leave a comment, you'll get 3 or 4 emails from that one transaction.
It's super, I agree with you. Like replying to Jira or Basecamp through email sometimes backfires completely because then it adds like, sometimes it'll add like the whole string of emails and like, no, I'm not, I agree with you. So moving off of emails, what is Todoist and who is using?
You were all talking about Trello with lists and boards. And so I use Todoist. I would say that like all roads lead to Todoist for me. All things, including my email, integrate into Todoist. So when I see an email I need to deal with later, I have a little like workflow where I just send it to Todoist. And then like, that's the first stop. And then the second stop is my calendar. So like I said, I even have a Todoist calendar on my calendar.
Oh my God.
Where my Todoist, like my to-do lists get overlaid. But yeah, Todoist is a to-do tracker. You can make lists. I have one for like quarterly home ownership stuff. I have like car maintenance that like reschedules every few months just to like remind me, here's a couple of things you need to take care of. Otherwise I will forget because I can't keep those things in my brain like Nick can. So yeah, it's basically like Trello because they recently released boards as well. So you can have the Kanban stuff. But it's really pretty and I like it.
Yeah, I've used it. It's pretty useful. And I have to be clear, I haven't kept those kinds of things in my brain for many years. It was just the first couple of years of my business where I could keep track just mentally of all my deadlines and tasks and things. It's been a long time.
There'll be a link to Todoist in the show notes, but just so you guys know, there is a free version. So you can get started with that for free.
So the next one on the list is also me. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask about Notion.
It's called Notion. So it's kind of like a docs and database. If you used Airtable, it's like an Airtable competitor in my experience. There's a free version for Notion as well. You can make like pages, docs, tables, lists. What's really cool is you can also make like linked databases and you can program in integration. So I can have like Todoist. I can have like a page with a Todoist embed and like the thing that I'm working on. So if I'm like writing up like a blog post, I can put my checklist on the same blog post and markdown format and stuff. And I have like my travel packing list for like every time I travel, I duplicate the same list and like add or remove things and then tag it by like season or location. Is it a family trip or not? Like, what did I forget after this trip? And The most common thing I used to forget was toothpaste, and I don't forget toothpaste anymore.
Oh, this is something you can easily buy.
How many?
I don't use Google Docs as much, so I use Notion.
How many of these apps do you have running on your computer? Like it seems like you have a bunch.
Todoist and Notion and Fantastica all not launch on startup.
Okay.
But I keep work and personal separate. So because we use Google Drive for work, I just don't use it for personal stuff.
Okay.
I also don't like the Google Drive. Like you need to have every single app for Google Drive in order to do things on your phone. And I like being able to like open Notion on my phone if I'm like somewhere and I like remember something I want to add to my list. And so it's partially why.
I like the fact that you're thinking cross-platform. I've obviously I use Apple stuff, so I'm kind of locked in.
I used to use reminders. I don't remember what feature it was that they didn't have that pushed me to Todoist, to be honest. But I recently took a look at reminders and notes, and I was like, oh, both of you have improved considerably since I moved off into third-party applications. And so I may go back at some point because I think Notes is starting to do most of what Notion does for me, minus the databases. And so I constantly reevaluate. I just really like apps.
Yeah, I will say Notion has an API, so Notes does not have an API. So what are these last two on this list?
I have a bunch of smaller apps listed here. Justimer, I don't know how to say it, is a timing app. So it sits in your menu bar. It's Mac only. Let's say you're working on something and you're like, I got to time box this for 30 minutes. I know some people who will just tell Siri to set in a reminder, but with Justimer, you can just like drag the little icon and set the time, and then it'll push notificate you when that time's done. So for example, when I'm doing like a panel or something, I'll set like 5, 10, 15 reminders. So I'll get like notifications when the time's up.
I like their example. It's like in an hour and a half, remind me to get a cup of coffee. I don't think I've ever needed a reminder for that a day in my life, but hey, you never know.
And then the last one is Hocus Focus or Freedom. Either of those do the same thing. They're a distraction blocker. So if you're really trying to focus on something and you, for example, don't want to open Google Chrome or don't want Slack, it'll just haze or dim away or ignore notifications from the applications you list.
Interesting. Yeah, I think learning to set some things aside so you can focus is also very important. If I have a lighter working day, then sometimes I'll have a YouTube thing up and kind of have it in the background. But if I'm focusing, the most I can have is music, if it's a heavy work day. Otherwise, I can't get through it.
Focus was critical for me when I worked at an agency because I felt like I was getting Slack notifications all day and I was getting like emails from a different client while I was working on a current client. And so I used that to just like ignore email, Slack, any social media that it may have had. And so that helped me like just focus on the thing. I think Freedom basically starts closing applications that are not your active application. So it just kept like removing things from my monitor.
Oh my God.
It was really
where did
intense.
that window go? Where did it go?
I used it for like a couple of months and then I couldn't do it anymore because I kept overriding it and being like, go away, exit.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay.
So the next thing that I put on the schedule to chat about was the manager versus maker schedule, which is something that I learned about where the different ways that people work and the different types of work they do. So managers, and I'm curious to hear what Nick thinks about this, but like managers are people who have a lot of meetings. And so their calendar usually has a lot of scattered meetings and there's not a lot of focus time. So they usually, what's beneficial for them is like buffers between meetings to like follow up or wrap up the things that they had to do after the meeting. Whereas a maker's schedule, you have that kind of curve at which you need to like dive into really focused work. And so I find that's like 1.5 hour to 2 to 3 hour blocks of time where I don't want to context switch because I'm like really deep into something. And so as someone who works in between these two roles, it can be really hard for me to like have a bunch of meetings all over my calendar and not be able to find any blocks of time to work. So on Mondays, I usually start blocking off maker time where I call it focus time and I don't let anybody schedule over it.
Yeah, I think, I kind of work similar too. And that's why I block different days off for different tasks and different clients, because I find personally, especially if I'm trying to focus on something, even if it's like a meeting and then 2 hours to focus in another meeting, I find that really reduces my productivity. So I try to, when I have meetings or a meeting day, I try to get them all in the same, like consecutive. Like, yeah, meeting after meeting after meeting could be training. But if I have, 4 meetings in a row and then a 4-hour block of time to work, I can take a 15-minute break after the meetings, get my head back into the, maker space, as you put it here, and then be productive for the rest of the day. Or even if the meetings are in the middle of the day, if I get 2 hours before, then a block of meetings, then 2 hours after, I can still be productive there. But that's one of the reasons why I've been blocking my calendar with large blocks of time, because, I'm kind of in the in-between space too. It really depends on what a client is asking of me. So I have some clients that they hire me just for bandwidth. So they need some work done. So they're literally just giving me tasks. And so for them, I just need to sit down and get the tasks done. I have clients that hire me to be an architect. And when you're architecting, yeah, you're doing proof of concept sometimes, but a lot of that is just meeting, gathering information, giving recommendations, meeting to give the pros and cons of different approaches. And then for some clients, they're a design agency and I'm their sole developer and architect. So for them, depending on the life cycle of the project, I'm either sitting down and building everything or architecting a solution for them. Or if a new requirement came in, re-architecting a solution sometimes. So, it really depends on the client and the life cycle of the project and which space I'm in. But especially recently, I found I really need to separate the two. I've never heard the term separate like that, but I'll have to think about that some. But I found I really have to separate the two times, because if I have an hour meeting and then an hour to work and then an hour meeting and then an hour to work, I'll never get anything done.
Yeah, when managing my calendar, will typically section things off into a couple of days. So like Monday, Tuesday will be like meeting days, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday will be like focus days if possible. Sometimes Friday becomes a meeting day depending on what's going on, but that's typically how I try to split up my calendar. Or I'll do mornings and afternoons if I know that, like, or vice versa, depending on what the flow of the week is going to be. But I try to keep pretty flexible, so that way people feel like I'm available when they need me, as opposed to like, oh, let me try to find some time on your calendar. Oh, you have like every afternoon blocked off. Before we get into close here, just in for a few minutes, I want to talk a little bit. We talked about a lot of productivity tools, different strategies. Time tracking can be, one of those things that's obviously necessary. Obviously, if you're working, for somebody, time tracking is important. I'm wondering, are you guys time tracking for your personal projects? Like, are you keeping track?
Absolutely
of that?
not.
No, not doing it.
Fatima,
I feel like you're going to give me the opposite answer.
Yeah, I don't even track for non-billable time very often anymore, because it just takes more energy. Like, because I can just look at my billable time if I need to see. I can look at my billable time for the week and be like, oh, I spent a lot of time doing non-billable stuff this week. Next week, I need to be better about that. But the amount of effort it takes to sometimes track that would just be too much.
I gotta feel like Fatima's doing analytics on her time.
I went down a rabbit hole a few years ago about quantified self and decided I was going to track everything and anything to see what kind of insights I could get out of that. So yes, I run rescue time on all of my devices and get like graphs and charts about what websites I've been on, where I spend my time. It's really hard. I don't track stuff I do like outside of the computer. Like I won't log, like I spent 7 hours sewing a t-shirt quilt. Like that doesn't go anywhere. But that is something that I'll track. Like at the end of the week, I'll have like a little like form with myself where I'm like, this week I worked on this and this really sucked and that really sucked. And that just like puts into Notion. So it's tracked somewhere. It's not tracked as data yet.
I'm not going to lie. You are an amazing human being. I don't know where you find time to do it, but
well, you just have to check your calendar to know when she finds time to do
There you
that.
go. That's it.
I am notorious for being like, I'm so sorry I missed your email. Last week was really hectic, but I never tell people why things are so hectic. A lot of stuff just runs, like rescue time just runs in the background. So I really like apps that just do things and then send me emails with like reports, because I didn't have to do anything to keep it working.
Sorry, last week was so hectic. I was running data analysis on the last 6 weeks of my life.
The amount of times I open the refrigerator versus
I really
productivity.
wish my refrigerator could tell me how many times I open but don't take something out. I'm starting to think that's a trend with me.
Huh. Interesting.
And on that note,
yeah. So if you have any questions or feedback or thoughts on how you maintain productivity when managing multiple projects, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal. You can join us in the Talking Drupal channel on the Drupal Slack. You can email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
you can promote your Drupal camp on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/camp promo.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose to become a patron. And as always, you get a little bit of the before and after show if you are a patron.
So we'd like to take a second to thank Fatima for joining us for 4 weeks. They weren't together, but they were 4 weeks. And we hope that you'll come and join us again at some point. And next week, we are going to be joined by Amy June. So we look forward to having Amy June with us and having her for 4 weeks. Fatima, thank you so much. And if folks wanted to get a hold of you, how could they go about doing that?
Sugar Overflow on Twitter or Slack, Drupal Slack.
And Candyland Discord, right?
Yeah, if you want an invite to the Candyland Discord, send me a message on Slack. We game almost every week, but usually every other week. And if you have cool productivity apps or interesting apps that you're using, do let me know, because I just love testing apps.
Or if you're a developer that needs somebody to buy your productivity app, it sounds like I would be more than happy to help you out with that.
Pretty much, yeah.
Nick, if people are looking to connect with you, how could they do that?
You can find me pretty much everywhere at NixVan, NICXVAN. And thank you for joining us, Fatima. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure you'll be back at some point. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, John,
they can do that on all the major social networks at John Picozzi. And EPAM is hiring. So if you are interested in coming to work for EPAM, you can check us out at epam.com and then ping me and let me know.
Thanks for having me as a guest. It's been super fun. If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Yeah. See you guys later.
See you guys next week.